Well, welcome everybody to the greatest crossover event of the century. Not the newest Avengers movie, unfortunately, but it is a crossover between PsycBiz and the integration conversation with Braum. And of course, he also has his own investment company, which we'll get to as well. Braum, how you doing?
I'm doing great, man. It's really cool to be doing this crossover finally. I remember back when I was like thinking about making videos about psychedelics. I was like, let me see if anyone else is doing this. And the only other person was you. And you had like 2 videos at the time. And I remember you had like a big inflatable shark behind you. It was like super
Yeah, it was a
funny.
dinosaur,
Yeah.
actually.
Oh, yeah.
And
Dinosaur.
had some creative
And,
differences with
yeah.
my business partner because personally I loved the dinosaur.
Yeah.
My business partner was a little bit more iffy on it. She's probably
Yeah.
right, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe it will
Well,
make a comeback
I
one of
mean,
these days.
we're still talking about it now. So it obviously like, caught my attention, but I was like, yeah, there's literally one other person talking about these like MindMed. I was like, this is crazy.
Well,
So
I
early.
also have to say that your videos on the topic were absolutely fantastic. So you went so into depth on each of the videos. Like if you're doing a video on MindMed, it would be an hour
Yeah.
long and you dive into like every minute detail. And it was provided a lot of value to me personally, making my videos, just watching what you did also. So I'm very happy to
Thanks, man.
finally get the chance to talk to you on camera. Of course, we've met in person
Uh,
before.
no, I appreciate it. And one last thing, unfortunately, I changed the name of the podcast away from the integration conversation. So
Oh,
now,
so what is it now?
yeah. So right now, because I couldn't think of a better name, it's just the Braum podcast.
Okay, I mean,
Because that's my name.
it's good
Yeah.
personal branding. You get
Yeah.
to put
Personal
your name out
branding.
there.
The thing with integration conversation is that every time I told people what the name was, they would be like, what? And then half of them would be like, what does that mean? Like no one got it. It was just
Yeah.
only people that were into psychedelics, like really hardcore, got it. And I was like, this is just too much. So yeah,
I
my
mean,
name is
whatever
Brom
works,
and the
works.
podcast is the Brom podcast. So that's what we're doing now. But yeah, man, glad to be here.
And as long as we're here, give yourself a little bit of a plug. Where can people find the Braum podcast?
Yeah, dude. So if you just go to Spotify, Apple, YouTube, anywhere podcasts are sold, you can find it. And you can follow me on Twitter at The Real Brom. That's where I post a lot of the new episodes and stuff there.
Awesome. So yeah, we kind of went way off onto some random topics there, but let's bring it back in because not only do you have a podcast, you also lead a venture capital firm when it comes to investing in psychedelic medicines. So I was wondering if you could tell us, because this channel mostly focuses on the public markets, but of course there is a whole nother world when it comes to psychedelics and investing in psychedelics. So I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about your firm, which is called I'm blanking on it right now. What's it called there,
It's
Brom?
yeah, that would be
Empath.
Empath
Yes.
Ventures. Yeah, Empath
So,
Ventures.
sorry about that. Empath Ventures. So if you could tell us a little bit about Empath and then also just generally the public versus private markets.
Yeah. Well, every public company starts off as a private company. So, they're very tightly intertwined. Oh, she's got the website up. So Empath Ventures was actually started out of the YouTube channel / podcast that we were just talking about earlier. I had left my job in the hedge fund world in 2020 and was trying to find something new to do. And I stumbled upon this like commercial psychedelics world, which is really fascinating. I had been using psychedelics for like my whole adult life personally, but never thought there would be investment opportunities around it. And started the podcast to just kind of like explore the industry side of psychedelics without really having an end goal in mind. I was just like, this is fun to do this podcast. I'll just keep doing it. And I'm doing the podcast and I start getting, emails from people that had listened to the podcast and they were like, hey, I like that you have this finance background. I like that you're talking about psychedelics. I've got $100,000 that I want to put into psychedelics. What do you think I should do with it? And I also had companies reach out to me and ask if I could use my podcast platform to like help promote their company or raise money. And I realized that I'd created potential sources of investment and potential sources of investment opportunities due to this podcast. And so that was kind of the reason that I decided to start Empath Ventures, was just to kind of take advantage of the position that I found myself in. There it is. It's like the first video I ever uploaded when I was going through my Britney moment and had dyed my hair red. So it's very weird. So anyway, yeah, set up the fund in September of 2021. The goal is to raise $10 million in total. I've raised $2 million so far and have deployed money into 10 different companies, all of them early stage psychedelics companies. So I'm more than happy to talk more about like the types of companies and everything. But yeah, that's kind of where the fund is at now. In terms of like the private markets versus the public markets, um, it's very different, right? Like with the public markets, you get constant updates on the performance of your investment. In the private markets, you make an investment and you might not get another updated price on that investment for, another 18 months.
So you mean I can't stress check the prices of my investments 20 times a day?
Yeah, you can't just, you can't give yourself carpal tunnel by refreshing or like scrolling down on your phone constantly. You get, of course, updates from the CEOs of the companies on how the company is doing, but in terms of the valuation, there's just no new information until the company raises more money at a, hopefully higher price. So it's a much slower game. There are also, there's in the public markets, there's a list of all the stocks. It's everyone knows every single company and anyone can buy any company. In the private world, it's not like that. There are a lot of deals that certain people don't know about. You kind of have to be in the human network of people that are, investing in these deals in order to find out about them. And then there's only limited amounts of, space to invest, right? Like a company may only be raising $1 million. And if you're not one of the first people to kind of get in line to make that investment, well, too bad. Where, that's generally not a problem in the public markets where anyone can pretty much buy at any time. So the dynamics are very different. It's much more focused on, human connections and sort of who than the
So
public
what
markets
made
are.
you decide to focus specifically on the private markets then instead of
Yeah.
the more public markets, like when you started your podcast?
Yeah, that's a good question. So one of the big things that I kind of noticed when I was doing my podcast was that, a lot, unfortunately, a lot of the publicly traded companies are, not of as high quality as you would like them to be. I think especially at this stage, like the industry is going to mature, that'll be different. But there were a lot of companies, as you know, that really went public as soon as possible. Which is generally something you want to avoid. Like being public is kind of a pain in the ass. It brings with it lots of reporting requirements. It costs a lot of money in lawyer fees and everything. So high quality companies, if they can, usually try to delay going public as long as possible. And I started looking at some of the deals that were happening in the private markets. And I kind of was like, man, these companies are way more interesting to me than a lot of the public companies are. And I also kind of had this realization that over time, there would be even more interesting companies started, and I wanted to get involved with them before they went public. Another thing just kind of had to do with me personally. I'd been working in a hedge fund for 7 years, and in the hedge fund world, we're dealing with public markets, and I kind of wanted to try something different, something where there's more of an informational advantage, where the playing field's a little less even than it is in the public market. So there were a lot of reasons, but I think the big one is just that I think there's more opportunity in the private markets if you can get access to it.
So what would be an example of a company that's currently a privately held company that has lots of potential that exists right now that's not publicly traded?
Yeah, man. I mean, tons, every single one that I've invested in, obviously. There are a lot of really interesting ones. So on the drug development side, there are some very cool companies doing work with machine learning assisted drug design. You can look at Mind State Design Labs, which went through Y Combinator last year. I've recorded a podcast with their CEO. There are some interesting companies. Yeah, I guess I need to update that because there are now 2 more companies, but Mind State Design Labs is one that is doing some very interesting next generation psychedelic development. New Life is one of these ketamine sort of telehealth apps where you can, get legal ketamine prescribed to you over the internet and shipped to you.
What do you think about that? To change the topic slightly, the idea
Yeah.
of home delivery ketamine, because I have talked to some people that have said that they think it's quite unsafe. So do you think that that's
Yeah.
something that is part of the future, or do you think? Well, obviously you're
Well,
investing
it's
in them.
part it's
So
part of the now.
it's part of the now.
It's part of the
Okay.
now, right? This is this they're currently selling the ketamine. It's not something that is happening in the future. It's happening now. So I don't, who are the people that are telling you that it's unsafe?
I'm going to plead the fifth on that because
Are
they
they
weren't.
are they people that run in-person ketamine clinics?
Yes, actually.
Yeah, of course.
Fair enough. You got to
Um,
think about your source.
so here's the thing. I mean, ketamine, we all know, I think that ketamine has some potential issues. It's maybe a bit more addictive than a lot of the classic psychedelics like psilocybin. Um, But overall, ketamine is one of these drugs that has been used for decades in humans, and it is generally very safe. I don't know if we can find like a pile of bodies that have come from ketamine. So in terms of the safety issue, I'm not too concerned, especially with this investment, New Life in general. One of the things that they do is they ship the lozenges that the people take like one at a time. They don't send you like a bottle and tell you to go for
Right.
it. They're like, you're doing one session next week.
Mhm.
Here is like your one lozenge that you are going to get in the mail,
And correct me
which
if I'm wrong, but it's usually a relatively low dose, right?
yeah, low to medium. I mean, in
Low to medium.
general, it's pretty difficult to get to the intensity that you might get with like an intramuscular injection with a lozenge, right? Just because the delivery
Mhm.
method is different. So yeah, you're generally not going, in deep into the ketaverse with your lozenge.
Is that a thing, or did you just
The
invent that right now? The
dude,
ketaverse.
I've been trying to coin the ketaverse term for a while. I think it's slowly catching on.
Nice. Have you done
um,
ketamine before?
Yeah.
I love the
Yeah,
I love the
yeah.
response.
No, I mean, as a participant in the psychedelics world, I think it's important to experiment with all the different, offerings that are out there to kind of have a personal feel for them. Um, I don't know that ketamine is my favorite thing ever. I find that it kind of removes my brain, whereas like psilocybin puts my brain like turned up to 11. But it's very interesting.
Awesome. So why don't we talk
Yeah.
about then the markets right now? Because as I'm sure everybody watching this
Yeah.
knows, they're kind of not doing great, to put it
Right.
lightly. So is it the same type of situation in the private markets, or is it two different
Yeah.
worlds?
Yeah. So, man, I thought you were going to ask me more questions about my ketamine experiences, but no, I'm just kidding. We can we can talk about that
We can
later.
circle back to that.
No. So, listen, man, the markets, every market, whether it's public, private, crypto, stocks, bonds, currencies, all the markets are connected. There's no isolated market, right? And when the markets crash, things become even more connected, right? So things in the private markets move more slowly. They don't crash as quickly, and the crashes are maybe not as dramatic and they're harder to see. But one of the things that happens for sure is that sort of the flow of capital slows down. So back last year, if some company set out to raise, $1 million, it might take them just, 2 or 3 weeks because there was like the flow of capital was so fast last year. Now the flow of capital has kind of slowed significantly. And so these rounds that were getting closed in 2 or 3 weeks are now taking 2 or 3 months to close. We're also seeing companies raising at much lower valuations than they were trying to. There were a couple companies that were pitching me, and I liked the company, but the valuation that they were asking for just seemed really high. And so I said no. And then a couple of months later, they came back and said, "Hey, we actually had a hard time getting the money at that valuation. We're we're cutting the valuation, down by, 40, 50%. Would you like to participate at that price?" And I'm like, "Sure, that's great." So yeah, man, I mean, the private markets are definitely slowing down as well.
Okay. And
Yeah.
how do you think we get out of this looking forward for the next couple of years?
Well, so much of this is kind of dependent on the entire global macro situation. There are a lot of things that are happening, whether it's the Fed raising interest rates, whether it's the war in Ukraine screwing with, the oil price. All of these things are causing the markets to do what they're doing. And all of this is kind of outside of the control of the psychedelics industry. The psychedelics industry has been hit harder in many ways than a lot of the markets at large, just because it's a new and hyper speculative industry. The thing that makes me excited, though, is that the underlying technology of psychedelics, which is the psychedelics themselves, is remains strong, right? Like this
Hmm.
changes nothing about the efficacy of psilocybin or MDMA or ketamine or anything. Whereas you look at, another new speculative market like crypto, for example. I'm going to stir the pot by talking shit about Web3 a little bit. The underlying technology is kind of yet to be proven, right? So I think psychedelics for sure will come back. Other markets may have a harder time coming back, but I'm very confident in psychedelics' ability to deliver on, their promise.
I love the fact that you consider it a technology because I
It
consider
is, dude.
myself, when I'm investing, as more or less a tech investor.
Right.
Everything that I've invested in one way or another perhaps with the exception of psychedelics, depending on how people look at it, is a technology. And I always tell people, like, this is technology. So I'm very happy to hear
Yeah.
that that very smart people in the industry like yourself view it the same way.
Yeah. No, it definitely is.
So I've got a little bit of a surprise here. When we were at Wonderland,
Oh
a
my God.
certain
I knew this was
individual
coming.
gave me these cards right here,
Yep.
and it is a deck of cards with questions on it to ask during interviews. And I won't lie, I did rig the top two. We're gonna go through 4 of them. So 2 of them will be random, 2 of them are rigged.
I'm
So
ready.
we're gonna start with this first one here, and it says. Let's see if I can get it up on the screen there.
It's all white. It's all whited out.
Oh,
Okay, here we go. Hang on. In
in
your
Europe,
opinion, which currently existing psychedelics company is the most innovative? Okay. Should we stick with the public companies? Because that's what people are.
you can give 2 answers if you want.
All right. Yeah. So, I mean, I think in the public markets, everyone hates it when I say this because everyone loves to hate on them. But, atai is probably doing like more interesting work than a lot of the other public companies out there. And there are many legitimate reasons to dislike atai, but I think that they're at least trying to break some new ground, and they're working with largely novel-ish compounds, doing some things that are slightly derivative, and they're not just trying to like patent psilocybin or run ketamine clinics or anything like that. On the private side, there's a company based in Australia called Silo, and I just interviewed their lead chemist and scientific co-founder on my podcast. His name's Sam Bannister, and they are actually trying to design entirely new classes of psychedelics, which is very interesting. We have tryptamines, we have phenethylamines, and most of the companies that are working on novel psychedelic molecules are making like derivatives within those classes. They are literally like working on inventing new categories entirely that would have like totally different experiences.
And this is using machine learning, or
there's a lot of machine learning. There's also a lot of sort of human intuition and oversight. Yeah, the Sam Bannister, the guy I interviewed, he has created some novel cannabinoids that became very popular before, and so he's got some experience doing that stuff. So I think those are my 2 answers for the public markets and the private.
Awesome. And now we are going to do the exact opposite. Let's see if we can get it to focus.
Which currently existing psychedelics company is the most overhyped? Interesting.
Yes.
Well,
sir.
I think at this point, no one is overhyped because the industry's been beaten down so badly. Like
Good question.
It's hard to find someone that's even hyped about it at the moment. But man, I'll tell you what, this is a slightly different answer, but one of the first videos I ever made that really made me feel like I'd hit a nerve was the video where I kind of criticized MindMed.
Okay.
And
I had a feeling you were going to say this too.
Dude, I mean, I think I got like death threats for making that video because there was so much hype around it. I don't know if you ever looked at like the comments on Reddit when I posted that video, but like, I mean, I think that I was largely correct in calling out MindMed for being, way overhyped. And their current stock price certainly reflects that.
Yeah. I mean, I personally still hold, I don't know if you saw, but like when it was at the height, I made a video saying like, look guys, I'm selling half my stocks because I don't know what's going to happen, but there's a good chance it could fall drastically. But I still hold on to the other half, and that's a holding it forever, come hell or high water type thing.
Yeah. There's a chance that I think they might be able to accomplish 1 or 2 things, but it's going to be tough. And I think that at the time they were certainly overinflating themselves, which is never cool.
Yeah, for sure.
But these days, again, my original answer of like I don't think there's much hype left in the industry is probably correct. I'm like, what company is even hyped up right now? I don't know.
I think that we'll probably end up seeing a round 2 of hype that will come and then dissipate before we get to the like kind of 5-year time horizon that we're looking at. So there'll probably be little bumps that come and go.
Yeah.
But yeah, let's move on to the next question. And now I don't know what these questions are going to be.
Oh boy.
So we will see. Okay, this is a good one. Are the experiences on psychedelics real? I can't get it to focus. That's fine. I'm giving you a blank card. I'm making up the question as I do it.
This is it's so funny. That's such an interesting question. I mean, they're as real as anything else that happens in your own mind, I guess, right? One of the big challenges, I certainly don't think that they are connections with some like larger entity or anything like some people do. But you know,
So you mean I wasn't
one of
really
the
talking with
yeah.
Jesus when I was in Amsterdam?
No, you were talking with me, dude. I was tripping next to you. No, I'm just kidding.
That was it.
Uh, the interesting thing is that you know, you can have these really profound insights on psychedelics, and one of the big challenges is that you come back and you're like, that insight in the moment felt so like real and true, and then you have to ask yourself, like, wait a minute, like, is it actually as true as it felt? Was that magnified by the drugs? Um, so it's tough, man. And this is kind of why integration is so important, because I think there's an element of truth in like all the realizations that you have on psychedelics. But if you're not careful, you can really end up focusing on the wrong parts of them and maybe overweight some of the things that you experienced. Your ego does a lot of really weird things when it's being attacked. Sometimes it can overinflate itself. Sometimes it can realize that that doesn't work, and it will start criticizing itself and try to make you believe that you're some kind of monster or whatever. And one of my mentors, actually this guy that was a co-founder of one of the biggest tech companies in Silicon Valley, who has done quite a bit of ayahuasca in his day. One of the best like piece of advice that he gave me for like processing a trip is he said, no matter how intense these realizations you take away are, remember that like you're not the Messiah and you're not a monster. Like you're somewhere in between. Like you're more just like a regular dude. So yeah, that's a very long-winded non-answer, but that's what I got
It'd
for
be
you.
very cool if you were the Messiah.
That would be pretty cool.
Alrighty, last one we got here. You ready to get personal, Braum,
Oh
or should we
boy.
give it a pass?
Oh God. I don't know. Which one is this?
Have you ever combined sex and psychedelics? How was it?
You know what's interesting is that I actually just invested in a company that is doing psychedelics and sex combined.
Oh, no way.
Um, yeah.
Give them a name
So
drop. Who are we talking
yeah.
about here?
The company is called Kanna Health, Kanna. And I don't know if have you heard of Kanna before, James?
I
The
want to
plant?
say that I have, but so many of these companies all have similar sounding names, and
Um,
there's like 100 that I've read about before, so I'm not
right.
sure.
So Kanna is a plant that is native to South Africa, and it's a succulent plant. And if you Google Kanna, you'll find a bunch of articles and Vice and stuff talking about how Kanna feels similar to like a natural MDMA. Very interesting. And this company, Kanna Health, has basically discovered that there's something about one of the alkaloids in Kanna that can delay orgasm time in men, and they are thinking that this could be a treatment for premature ejaculation. And it turns
This
out
sounds like a billion-dollar market.
you're totally correct, and especially because premature ejaculation currently does not have an FDA approved treatment in the US. There's no FDA approved treatment. And by the way, the guys that are behind this company were some of the co-founders of Compass Pathways and atai. So they're not just like random people. They're people that have actually taken a company, you know, from startup to IPO on the major exchanges. So I'm pretty excited about that. But as for me personally, you know, all I'll say is that, you know, a good investor always does his due diligence.
Okay,
So
fair enough. Have you ever tried Kanna? I know we're getting
yeah,
sidetracked here, but
yeah,
this is
yeah.
actually fascinating to
Have.
me.
I have the one of the interesting things about Canna is that it's not illegal. You can buy it on like Amazon. Yeah. I don't know that the stuff you can buy on Amazon is like the best quality, but you can
Mhm.
buy it. You can buy it, and or it'll come to your mailbox like no problem. Um, and there's definitely, you know, a kind of MDMA-ish feeling, not nearly as intense as
Okay.
you know, an actual MDMA trip, but there's something there.
And this
I don't know if you've ever done like kratom, which is, you know, kind
No,
of
I
like a
haven't.
natural opiate.
But
I would say it's like kind of on the intensity level of something like kratom, you know,
okay.
mild, but you still notice it.
So getting back to
Um,
this company then, just because I'm
yeah,
interested in it, learning about
yeah,
it for the first time, do you know how far along they are in their scientific process? Have they done preclinical phase 1
yeah.
trials?
So they're preclinical now. They have some solid rat data, um, which means
Imagine
that
that was your job to get rats to and see how long it takes for them
yeah, yeah.
to ejaculate.
Yeah, it's a thing that I thought of immediately when I was thinking about this. You know, it turns out that the way that apparently it's done in the labs is that this is like the industry standard test for like ejaculatory time, is that they take the rats and they basically give them amphetamines until they spontaneously ejaculate.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, apparently if you give a rat enough amphetamine, it will just ejaculate. So anyway, they give they had two groups. One of them took the canna and then did the amphetamines, then one of them just did the amphetamines by themselves. And it's not canna specifically, it's canna, it's a specific alkaloid from canna that they're like synthesizing and everything. But
Okay.
and the premature ejaculation thing, it's like, it's funny to joke about and everything, but it is a real issue. It's like a big market potential. Supposedly like 20% of men have this issue, right? Like the video, if you have this issue. But because canna has these sort of like natural MDMA like qualities, they are looking at, other alkaloids or other formulations of it to be used as sort of a, maybe, you know, for other issues, outside of the sexual health thing, like maybe more classic, like neurological issues, or sorry, psychiatric issues, not neurological. So it'll be interesting. It is they mentioned there on the website, which I see, the way that it works is as an SRI, which is similar to a, SSRI. It's just not selective. So there's some very familiar properties of it. Yeah, it's interesting. We'll see.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, I'm excited about the fact that you told me about this
Yeah.
company, because
Yeah.
I could imagine that if it were actually to work, of course, we're at the very beginning of the race here, that
Yep.
could be a really big deal.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to take time, right? We just invested in
Mhm.
their seed round, and it's going to take, a couple years for them to get into phase 2 and 3 trials. Yeah, it could be a big deal. And then there are other people that have looked at psychedelics for sex. There's this woman, Dr. Molly Malouf, who she has a company that is looking at. I don't know exactly what she's doing. I think she's maybe pivoting a little bit, but she has written and spoken a lot about the combination of psychedelics and sex. I think there's definitely, something there.
She's got the perfect name for it.
Dude, seriously. Yeah, Dr. Molly. That's like her legal name too. But that's the thing, man.
fantastic.
People are going to combine the idea that you can restrict psychedelics to be used in these like super serious clinical settings is absurd. Like since the beginning of time, people have been combining substances, drugs included, with all their activities, working out, having sex, studying, whatever. Like people use things for whatever they want and you can't stop it. And to pretend that you're like above that because you're some sort of like super sophisticated investor that doesn't want to like talk about sex or whatever, it's silly. It's not how the world works.
Of course not. So I think we should wrap it up now. We're getting on to half an hour. Brom, where can people learn more about Empath? And also, can people invest in Empath? How exactly does that work for people that don't necessarily understand how VCs work?
Well, you have to be an accredited investor first. That's not my rule. That's the government's rule. But if you're interested in learning more, you can go to empath.vc. You can shoot us an email, hello@empath.vc, and I'll set up a meeting with you. Unfortunately, it's a little bit more difficult than just investing in a stock, but yeah, we can definitely talk about it if you're an accredited investor. And yeah, check us out at empath.vc. Find me on Twitter at @therealBraum, and check out the Braum podcast anywhere podcasts are sold. Thanks so much,
Awesome.
James.
Thank you for being on, Brom. We'll chat soon.
Cheers.